All right, cool. So I think we're going to have a couple of people join as we progress through this thing, but this thing is recorded, so we will send you um, a copy of the recording once we're done, and we'll make little snippets from this, and we'll post it on Spotify, and we'll post it as content on our social media and stuff. So you'll see a lot of what we discuss here today repeated um, over the next few weeks, months. And so there'll be plenty of access to what we discuss here today. So first of all, thanks everyone for coming, joining us. Today we're going to be talking about basically what's not what has not been very understood over the past 10, 15, 20 years, but is only now starting to surface because of more data being collected and stuff. And that's training, women's fitness and health. Most of the studies that were done in the past were done on men. And now they're starting to do a lot of studies on training and fitness and nutrition and all of that stuff on women. And it's multifactorial. There's a lot of things going on with women's training, and we're going to cover all of the key topics here today, right? And so how we're going to go about this, we're going to have 7 topics, maybe 8 topics that we're going to discuss. We're going to spend about 10 minutes at each topic. And while we're on the topic, you can go ahead and shoot your questions on the chat box, or you can raise your hand and just I'll unmute you, and you can unmute yourself and you can ask the question. But just keep your mics on mute while Alexi's talking, so there's no distraction in the background. So we're going to do the Q&A literally topic by topic. So at the end of each kind of topic that Alexi explains, we're just going to run through whatever questions you guys have and deep dive into the nuances. We don't have too many people here right now, but I think we will have a few people join in. So if it stays like this, we can get into the nitty gritty of the nuances that everyone's expecting or everyone is experiencing. So we're going to, let me actually pull up the topics, and we'll start with the first topic that we have on schedule. Let me see, I lost it on my screen. Let me pull it up. Apologies. All right, cool. So we played around where we were going to start off the topics with, and Alexi recommended that we start with just the basics, right? The benefits of just basic strength training for women, right? Why it's important to increase lean muscle mass, because and maintain bone density and boost metabolism early on, just because it has all of these downstream effects that really are going to help you health-wise. I mean, strength training is such a crucial component of long-term health, especially for women, right? And so Alexi is going to start talking about kind of the basics of strength training and what we need to be focusing on, especially for the women, and how to avoid things like female athlete triad, which is one of the questions that came up in our poll. And so I will hand it over to you, Alexi, to go into the nitty gritty of this topic. So just the benefits of strength training for women.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Andy. Ladies, just a quick preface as well after Andy is just that what we've realized in, we've had the box open since 2018. And, when we first started, we saw, like, fair enough, a huge demographic of men come in, young men, early, maybe even to late 20s. And what we've seen as we've grown and been in business for 6 years is that we've started getting a lot more women that are joining our gym. Some women that may join us have prior experience with strength training, and some obviously don't. So I think as a general rule of thumb, strength training is not, how do you say, the benefits don't just apply to women. This is for the general populace of humans, right? When we do strength train, for example, we are helping to help reduce natural body fat, right? We don't want to get to the point where we're building excessive body fat, because that's, number one, going to cause metabolic health conditions that we don't want later on in life. And also it's going to help reduce self-esteem and just your quality of life. So being able to maintain, a favorable body fat to lean mass percentage. The second one is we have to build lean muscle mass, which Andy says, as we age, this is specific to women, we will start to lose the ability to, how do you say, grow or to get more muscle mass as we age, because we've got different hormonal factors that are going to be working against us. So very important. Doesn't matter where you are it doesn't matter if you're 15 years old or you're coming to us as a 45 years old lady. it doesn't matter. Start your journey. There are benefits to building muscle. It's going to help with stronger bones, bone density, healthier joints. It's going to help you improve sleep, right? Blood circulation. It's going to help with your cognitive, mental health, cardiovascular health. Yeah, your ability to be able to kind of exchange oxygen, use oxygen for where your body needs it to go. And of course, the last thing, of course, is building self-esteem and confidence. So those are just the general researched benefits that we can see, that apply again to male, female, doesn't matter the gender, that we can see actually are of benefits for long-term health on longevity. I think one of the things I saw recently was, you know, kind of a quote that mentioned like the muscle mass on your body will tell me more about aging than the wrinkles on your face, which is very true. Obviously, as we age, we're going to lose collagen. Of course, we're going to get wrinkles on the face. But the one thing that we really try to consistently tell women is that you need to be strength training. You need to be maintaining some sort of stimulus to keep your muscles, well, if you're not growing them, then at least to maintain them, that we don't lose them as we grow older. And that's something that's really, really important. You'll see that in our base programs. Build, for example, is one of those classes that we really, really strongly suggest anyone that's new to us come in, because it really gives you that foundation of understanding how to move your body, the proper mechanics, and how, for example, you're going to progressively overload over that program cycle. So I say this very generally, and especially for women, because let's be honest, most women will rather go for cardio than strength train. And I think a lot of that perception is that, hey, I want to lose weight. Andy, correct me if I'm wrong. I think you've also worked with a lot of the women that we've had, on the onboarding, where they come to us and we help them get settled into the gym, right? Could you give us a little bit of insight into like maybe some of these women that, the concerns that they have?
Yeah, so like I think one of the most common things that I've seen working with, especially I would say women closer to their 30s, is chronically undereating, right? And yo-yos of dieting, right? So going in phases of high carb, then completely cutting out carbs, and then reducing fat, trying just different things. And one of the biggest things I've noticed is just not a proper fueling strategy. And I think that's one of the things that came up on the topics when we discussed is this female athlete triad, right? Energy deficiency, menstrual dysfunction, bone loss. And I think it comes down to just in general, not knowing how the body responds to food and what each one of those macronutrients are, what their roles are, right? And so I think if anything, there's two things. There's the one thing is women generally are very afraid to lift weight because they think they're going to get really, really bulky, which it's topic for another conversation, but it's virtually impossible, right? You have to put an enormous amount of effort into just building 1 pound of muscle tissue, right? It takes a lot of commitment to that very specific process. And I think if women in general started building better relationships around food, and this goes to guys as well, but I think for women it's more, there's a lot of restriction.
A lot of a social thing, right?
Social, 100%. And there's a lot of misinformation out there on what carbohydrates do to your body, right? And I think breaking those beliefs is the biggest thing. And so breaking the belief of what food's role in the body is, and breaking the belief that you're not going to get super, super, super muscular unless it is your sole purpose, right? I think those are the two obstacles that I see when the women that we work with, when they overcome that, boom, everything starts changing. When they overcome those two kind of beliefs, when they break those beliefs, those are the kind of like the triggers, or like the catalyst for huge change. That's the biggest thing I've noticed. Sorry, I'm going to charge my laptop before we.
But saying to what Andy was speaking of, I think a lot of the time, initially when I mentioned that most women will avoid the strength training, is number one, the perception that, oh, I'm going to look muscular and I'm going to get too bulky. Again, like Andy said, virtually impossible unless you are literally, I've been trying to grow on muscle mass for the longest time, and it literally has taken me 3 good years to put on 3 kilos of muscle mass and to sustain it, not to lose it like the next week. It has been, it has been frustrating. And I've told Andy, like, why do I not see this change? And it really does take a lot of time, concerted effort, research, and kind of looking at what you're doing, analyzing and seeing how you can optimize maybe when you're eating your meals or how much you're eating at what time, which we'll get into a little bit later. But generally coming into women's fitness, strength training is so important. When we say strength training, this is literally resistance training, right? Another thing I hear is a lot of the time is, listen, I come from a yoga background as well. That was where I got my training and certification on before I started into strength and conditioning work. And people will come to me and be like, oh, well, I already do, I do strengthening work and I do yoga and Pilates. And in all honesty, heart of hearts, ladies, I am not trying to knock any other discipline. There is a place for yoga, definitely. I wholeheartedly believe in that, in helping you with, just maintaining baseline strength or getting some sort of flexibility and maybe even the more spiritual side of it. Similar with Pilates, there are very many things that we can learn from a Pilates practice, especially when it comes to core strength and stuff like that. But when people say, well, they do this as a strength training program, that's not really where we're going to see the results. And predominantly it's because we're not overloading or not using enough external weight to be able to allow our muscle tissues to grow. So a lot of the yoga, it's a lot of body weight movement. With Pilates, we're working on maybe a tinier, more, how do you say, the more deeper muscle groups of the core, then maybe we would be using the larger muscle groups of the quadriceps or whatnot. But again, when we want to see strength, what we are literally looking at is a stimulus or a change in that muscle so that when we do stress that muscle and it has to repair itself, they're going to come back stronger, right? That's one of the things I do want to mention. So again, not knocking any other disciplines. Resistance training specifically is, Mark, lifting heavy shit. That's what's going to be able to get you those kind of adaptations that you want in the muscle tissue. So that's just a little bit about, strength training and why you should do it. One of the things that we like to talk about with ladies that come in here is in order to see some sort of definite progress across maybe, 4 weeks or 6 weeks or even, 2 months, we need to be at least training or strength training 3 times a week. This is outside your other endeavors. Of maybe, that jog or that walk you take or that tennis lesson that you do. Strength training is quite specific. We are literally there to tax muscle growth to try and elicit a response. So again, very, very different. Try and think about how you can, especially as we are aging, again, like I said, in our mid-30s, we really should be lifting heavy. So that was one of the things that I did want to mention to the ladies, because I did get question of people, talking to me about yoga and Pilates, but there are distinct differences between the 2 or 3 training styles, if that makes sense. One of the other things I'd really, really like to tell women is when they come into CrossFit Salon, right? You may have been with us for a year, you may be relatively new with us for 3 weeks. This is something that is so important. You need to eat. Again, I'm going to come back to misconceptions that people have. And again, I used to have this when I was younger. I would think, all right, I'm going to go and exercise and I'm going to maybe run 45 minutes or whatever on the treadmill because I thought that was my way of losing weight. And my perception was that I'm going to not eat anything, right? Because if I don't eat anything, then I would be able to go into that workout and then as what I thought was burning fat and using my fat to help power my workouts. Little did I know that was actually not helping me. I never really lost the weight. I never really saw much of a change, obviously, in muscle mass, because again, with cardio, if you are not strength training, some of that can start to eat into muscle mass. Am I right, Andy? If we are not fueling correctly. So my one piece of advice is do not come into the gym, especially in the morning, ladies. Morning, our cortisol levels are through the roof, right? That's the way our body tells us, right? It's morning, it's time to wake up. We got to get up and do stuff. But understanding that cortisol for women, we don't want it to be at this elevated stage all the time, right? So if we are coming into the gym first thing in the morning, what I would like to recommend is that you eat something. And what that something is going to be a proportion of proteins and carbohydrates. So a very good example is I would have a shake. So for me, if I wake up in the morning and I just naturally, if it's too early, you don't have the appetite to eat something. So for me, I'd rather drink something in the morning, make sure that I actually get those nutrients that I need. So I'll have a scoop of protein powder. That will probably be about 32 grams of protein right there. I'll put like half a cup of oats, and or a banana, not either or. So it's one of the two. Mix that with water. I usually add my creatine in there as well. Blend that and have that before I work out. And that's usually going to be maybe 45 minutes to an hour before I work out. So that's something that's really important. So if you really don't feel like you can even chug that protein shake, get a banana, right? Get an apple, put some peanut butter on your apple and munch on that. Something in your system is better to signal to your body and to your brain, right? There's nutrients coming in right now, so I am ready to go and deliver whatever effort I need to do in that particular workout. What I usually see is women come in fasted, which means they've had maybe nothing but maybe coffee or just water in the morning. And then they come in and do endurance. And in our endurance workouts, they are high intensity. And that is the intention, because we are trying to set pace. We are trying to improve our cardiovascular health. But here we are with women that are not fed, underfueling, and you're asking them to go at RPE, a rate of perceived perception of effort of an 8-9. They're not able to hit those numbers. So while you think you're getting a good workout, in actual fact, you're not actually completing that workout as it was intended to, because you might be going at 5 and 6 because you have no fuel that's in your body or enough stores in your body for you to be able to keep up with that demands of that workout. So that's something I'd really like to tell women, because it is such a big misconception that, you know, not eating is going to help you lose fat. It literally is one of those things that doesn't make any sense. And here we are trying to break that misconception with women. So please, please try and eat something. It doesn't have to be like a rice up, you know, whole butt packet. Please don't eat a butt packet. You will throw up. But, you know, just as it is important for women to eat something before we work out, what's also important is that post-exercise snack. Now, this is even more important, I would say, because what happens right after exercise is that we have now elevated cortisol levels. Yeah, we've already gotten up in the morning. We've then added another stressor, which is exercise. And in order for us, or for our bodies, for women, we kind of go back to a baseline within a much shorter time period than men. Men maybe go back to that maybe in 4 or 5 hours later. We go back to that time frame of baseline in 2 hours. So in order for our body to start repairing that muscle group, to be able to kind of reap the benefits of post-exercise, you know, the effects of the post-exercise, we want to be able to drive testosterone so that we're actually bringing down that stress level so that our muscles are repairing themselves. We need to be able to eat protein within 30 minutes of, roughly around 30 grams of protein, 30 minutes after your workout. And then the rest of your meal, if you can't, obviously you don't feel very hungry, understandably, after your workout, you can then eat the rest of that breakfast or that post-workout meal, maybe within 90 minutes of finishing your workout. So, for example, maybe you'd come back and eat maybe my 3 eggs, right? Because ladies, we have to also understand when you're eating eggs, people will be like, oh, I had an egg this morning. FYI, one single egg probably contains 6 grams of protein, right? Again, 30 grams of protein. So we need to be able to have strategies of food that we can incorporate and not have to come back home and then rush to go off to our marketing because this is what happens with women. We get back from our workout and then we're like on to the next thing, on to figuring out the kids, the groceries. Let's be honest, this is, if you have kids, this is how it works, right? We're trying to get a lot done in a very short period of time. We come back after our workout, we miss that post-workout meal, and then what do you find? Come midday, you are slumping, right? Again, this is a key indicator that we're not fueling ourselves. We're not eating enough to recover our body from what we've just caused stress. And if we don't, what happens? Our cortisol levels stay elevated. We don't want our cortisol levels to stay elevated. Then it becomes a chronic condition, right? So make sure before you're coming in for a workout, get a small mix, small snack, protein, carbohydrates. Andy, specifically, the reason why we don't have fats, I think you can explain a little bit about that before we eat.
Yeah, so basically,
before we work out, rather.
so what you want to really do before your training session, I would say maybe like 30 to 45 minutes before, you want to get easily digestible carbohydrates and easily digestible protein. A good, very simple way would be a protein shake with a banana in it, right? Or white bread with chicken on it, right? If you are able to digest food quickly. But I think liquid calories and fruit are the best way to go about it. The reason you want fast digesting is because it needs to be in your bloodstream quick. It needs to be there within about an hour, right? What happens is when you first start warming up, cortisol is going to release. As soon as cortisol release, your body starts breaking down glycogen, so stored carbohydrates, and releases into the blood, right? So that's going to be your first source of energy that you get. Then what you ate, your dietary calories, will come into play about 20, 30 minutes into your training session, 40 minutes into your training session. Generally, what happens when you don't eat before training, you'll feel okay in the beginning. Your body will break down what is already stored, send it into the bloodstream, and then 30 minutes into the session, you just go zip and you zonk. That's because there's no dietary supply in there. And your body needs to now, break down fats, and it becomes an inefficient way to provide energy. So you want fast digesting carbohydrates, right? I would even say if you don't want to eat the protein, you don't have to eat the protein, but definitely get your carbohydrates in with a little bit of protein. The reason you don't want fats is because fats take a long time to digest, and it slows down the digestion process. So you want minimal fats pre-workout and minimal fats post-workout so that your body can quickly absorb everything. Easy source of carbohydrates is fruit, honey, dates, things like that, right? Very sugary stuff. That's if you're going to eat sugary stuff around your training is where you want to do it, right? And then your fats should be further away from your training session because you don't need that energy right away. So yeah, I would say a good ratio would be, let's say you're eating 20 grams of protein, you want to eat 40 grams of carbohydrates, a 2-to-1 ratio. 10 grams of protein, 20 grams of carbohydrates. 30 grams of protein, 60 grams of carbohydrate. The prescription of the actual caloric value is dependent on you as a person, on your age, obviously your gender, your activity level, your muscle mass. And so those are nuances within that. But if you just right away get a little bit of carbohydrate, a little bit of protein before your training, you're going to find that halfway through your training, you'll have that second wind. You won't zonk about that 30-minute mark. Generally, when we coach classes, we'll see that 30-minute mark, people start dropping, right?
Yeah.
And so that's generally because you're underfed.
I think, yeah, sorry, no, nothing to add. Any questions regarding this? Because I know it's quite a nuanced topic. If anybody has any questions on post workout snacks or meals.
If you just put it in the chat or unmute and ask your question, we can do it that way. Give it like 15 seconds. Better type fast.
So hi, so I have a question. So I generally, what I do is I've got 2 kids. So for me, it's a quick cup of coffee, a banana, maybe 45 minutes before. And yeah, 30 minutes in, I zonk. I do during the workout. I get really tired 30 minutes after. So should I then add maybe a bowl of oats or 2 slices of bread to that banana and then just increase the carb load and then come?
What was it that you're eating again?
So I have a cup of coffee with sugar in it, and I have a banana, big one.
Okay. I would add protein to it, not add banana. So if you add a little bit of protein to it, it'll slow down the absorption process. So if you just have the carbohydrates, it'll absorb really quick. And then you'll have this spike and then you have this crash. And so if you add a little protein to it, protein slows down digestion and fat slows it down even further. Right? So if you want to be full for longer, you want to have proteins and fats in your meal because they keep you full for a long period of time. That's why eggs are such a really good way to calorie control. You eat a ton of eggs and you just don't feel like eating the rest of the day. And so what I would actually do is not add more carbohydrates. I would add a little bit of protein, and you'll find yourself releasing those carbohydrates into the bloodstream a little bit slower.
Yeah.
So you'll have that energy available later on in the session.
So could I have so I have a protein shake right after. It has 24 grams. As soon
I
as
would have
I
that
finish
before.
it. Okay, so have that before. So then what about
Yeah.
the after? Should I also take another 24 grams after?
It wouldn't
Can you
hurt.
get
It wouldn't hurt?
It
Okay,
wouldn't hurt. You can
so-
split them in two. So let's say you do 30 grams of protein, you do 15 before, 15 after.
Oh, I can
Right.
split two. Okay. Or I
Yeah.
could even go for maybe eggs and like whole food with protein after, and then the shake before. That works?
That
Yes,
works.
yes. So that's, sorry, just to talk to Nisreen,
No,
that's
go
actually
ahead.
what I do. Nisreen, thank you for your question. That's actually what I do, to be honest with you, because what will happen is, so even if I'm not, even if I'm not working out, if I coach a class, sometimes my strain can be just as hard as if I'm doing strength training, to be honest, because you're, managing people. So I'll have a protein shake just to make sure, I'm alert and I'm able to kind of deliver the class that I want to deliver, high energy, whatever it is. But right after I'm done, or even if it's with a workout, I have 2 boiled eggs, and people laugh at me because it's the most unsexiest thing I have, but it's literally the easiest thing to do, right? I always have 2 boiled eggs minimum in my lunchbox. And then I have, furthermore, I will also add maybe a salad. When I say salad, like a salad leaves, I will add my tomatoes, cherry tomatoes. I will add maybe an apple, or even a mandarin in there. So what I do want to mention is that, I have to be prepared with this though. Like you mentioned, Nishan, you have kids, right? That prep
Yeah.
time when you're rushing back and forth, we don't have a lot of time to think about it. So most women will skip the meal. And that's where the downfall starts to happen. We
Okay.
need to be prepared. We need to be prepared. So now start thinking what you can prepare for yourself the next day, the night before, so that you've already got it with you, whether you're going back home, driving back home, or on the way back home with the driver, whatever, get your second dose in. We need, as women, we are constantly juggling so many things. No offense, Andy, but after becoming a mom, my demands for food went up. And that's because I had a lot more things going on. I not only had coaches, I was coaching classes, I was also doing my own training, and literally managing a little person. That's a lot more thought process, bandwidth for the head. So we need to be a little bit more organized as moms, because we're also thinking about everything else we need to organize for all the other people in our house. We need to be organized with ourselves first. So set yourself up first, because we know that if we are not the ones that are good, things around us are going to start to fall, and you're going to start to get frustrated. So try, if you can, Nisreen, try and test out few different fueling strategies after, and see what makes you feel good, like sated after your workout session in the mornings. You come for 8:30, right? Or is it 7:30?
So 7 o'clock CrossFit as of
Okay.
recent.
Okay.
Your recovery session on Wednesday. But I will actually try to do what Andy said, maybe do the protein shake before.
Yeah.
And make a snack basically for myself.
Yeah.
I'll do that.
But very important is that we, get that protein 30 minutes before.
Yeah.
And like I said, if you can't get the rest of the carbohydrates in, that's okay if it goes on, within 90 minutes of after your last session. That's fine. We might have to break that up just to make it easier for us to consume and plan around.
And on the same thing, just one more thing, Andy. So what I usually do is, okay, I will swap the protein, but I also do like about 3 to 5 grams of creatine for daily maintenance. I usually just mix it with my protein. Should I do that then before, or shall I leave the creatine for after? I don't know
Creatine's
about
one of the supplements creatine's one of the supplements. It doesn't really matter. I don't know in the context of women, but I understand that creatine absorption, it happens regardless. As long as you take the 3 to 5 grams of creatine.
I put my creatine in my protein shake as well, just to let you know. I put that in as well as my probiotics. So I just dump it all in there, because I know first thing in the morning, I've gotten everything I need to.
Okay,
It's
perfect.
done.
Okay.
It's like a
I've ticked
vitamin.
off those boxes.
Right, great.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just try that
Thank
for
you.
the next session. We'll see
Great,
how it
great.
goes. Thanks.
I wanna
Andy, I
think
think
of
there's
it
a few
as
questions
like-
that come in.
Yeah, I answered some of them, like some of the. Yeah, anyway, so no butter.
Alexi, can I
Someone
ask
has
you
asked,
something?
no butter in bread.
Sorry. Yes.
Go ahead.
Alexi, so usually I try to get 2 boiled eggs in and 3
Okay.
dates with a black coffee. Is that enough for a workout or do I need to add anything else?
That's before your workout, right?
Yep, yeah, about 1 hour before.
Yeah, that's completely fine. I mean, how do you feel like in your session? That really comes down to how are you feeling in that session? Are you able to sustain what you feel is that effort throughout that 60-minute session?
I kind of feel heavy when I have breads or anything added onto it. I
Right.
think this is more comfortable for me.
Yeah, that's correct.
But
I
only
think it
thing
always
is,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, just that I don't take anything immediately after I get back. I don't seem to be very hungry for some reason. But then later on, I get super hungry.
Right. So when we don't eat right after,
Mm.
especially for women, because we tend to return to baseline much quicker than men do. So this is something where I recommend eating something 90 minutes before. It's because if we don't get that food into our body, we stay in this breakdown state where our cortisol level is really high, and then we don't reap the benefits of, the post-exercise, the benefits of exercising, basically, because it just turns us into this catabolic state where it's like asking for fuel. We're not giving it anything. So it's going to start to basically get it from whatever is there. And most likely it's going to start to eat into your muscle mass, which is exactly what we don't want, ladies, because what we are trying to do is build muscle mass, especially when we get to our mid-30s. Most of us, I think, are already in that age gap, starting mid-30s all the way up to 50s. And you'll start to see as you age, it is so much harder to put on that muscle mass. For hormonal reasons. So that's why try and see if you can, even if it's something small, get a little bit of protein 30 minutes right after, and then get the rest of your meal a little bit later when you are feeling hungry.
Got it.
So
So I'll
you've
cover
got
some of the
questions.
questions. Melissa asked, is it recommended for someone who struggles to lose weight to take creatine? You want to do that? You want me to take it?
No, please take it.
So basically, it won't negatively affect fat loss. Now, fat loss and weight loss are two different things. Fat loss is the redistribution of your body weight, whereas it may affect weight loss. Like you'll have some water retention because of creatine, but it won't negatively affect fat loss. If anything, it's going to positively affect fat loss. Just because you're going to be able to have higher training intensities, build a little bit more muscle, boost metabolism a little more. As a result, you lose more fat, build more muscle. But in terms of the weight on the scale, it might fluctuate a little bit because there is a little bit of water retention. Yeah, shall we move to the next thing? So this is one of the things that, so this is another one of the base things before we actually get into the nitty gritty and the nuances of the menstrual cycle and all of that. Now, nutrition is obviously not the only factor in recovery. We have hydration, we have sleep, we have stress management, especially with mothers juggling so many responsibilities. I think you would be the person to talk about how to manage these things and how to structure them on a day-to-day basis, or what kind of advice you give to them. I think once we get done with this, we'll move on to the other stuff.
In terms of nutrition and recovery, sorry.
Yeah, so we're talking now. We're talking about hydration, sleep, and stress management. How that really affects everything.
Yes.
Nutrition is not the only recovery factor, the training factor.
So, if you've seen our pyramid, at the very base, we've got sleep, right? And this is so important because I think we also come from a hustle culture where it's like, oh, I work late nights, I work long hours, and there's some sort of glory in that. And again, I used to come from that, so I understand. But really, when we're looking at recovery, and as active women, everybody on here comes to the gym, right? You guys are active. You're coming in 3 to 5 days a week. Just as much as we place importance on exercising and training, it's nothing without that balance of recovery. If I don't recover, I'm not going to be able to train properly for my next workout. And then you just kind of keep falling back. You're not going to see any results. So I've always been big on sleep. I literally am a different person when I'm not sleepy. Andy will know this. I am, for lack of better words, I'm a bitch. But you guys will know this. On lack of sleep, moms who have newborns, lack of sleep, ask yourself, your attention span, your cognitive function, your ability to be patient when dealing with things, it's all gone. So the first and foremost, the most important thing is making sure that we're getting adequate sleep. Now, for most of us, it's going to be about 7 to 8 hours a night. Couple of things that we can do to help improve sleep. If you are one of these people that work late hours, or work in a time zone that maybe you're up at a different time and working throughout the night, so maybe you are not like the rest of us who are waking up with the sun and going to sleep with it. You need to pay attention to, number one, the temperature of the room, right? So we need to have a cool environment to fall asleep properly. That's number one. Number two, ideally, if you have blackout curtains or something where there's no light peeking, all right? The ability for our body to go to sleep and stay asleep, literally our body temperature has to drop about 2 degrees, right? So some of you ladies know this. When you're just about to get into your period and you're in your luteal phase, you'll start to notice that your sleep is not very good. You might have the night sweats. You might just have a little bit more disruption in your sleep-wake times, and you might wake up in the morning not feeling very rested. So really important, try not to eat very, very close to sleep time. So if you go to sleep at 9, try and eat your meal by 6. Try not to do anything excitable just about you, but you guys know this, right? No one goes and workouts at 6:30 and then comes back and tries to get to bed by 9. Like, it's not possible. You have that elevated cortisol in your system, obviously from that post-exercise effect. So we want to be able to do what we can to make sure that as we get closer to nightfall, we're also looking, maybe in the evening, we're starting to see the sun fade. Sorry, I should have also mentioned this. First thing in the morning, we should go out and see the natural morning sunlight. This starts to kick our circadian rhythm and tell us this is morning, this is when we kickstart our day, cortisol level rise. When we come to nighttime, we want the cortisol levels slightly lower so that we can actually get to a position where we are falling asleep and staying asleep for longer. So again, nice cool room, ideally a blackout room. Avoid screen time, right? A lot of us, Netflix, catching up on messages. Ladies, this is activating parts of your brain, which is going to make it hard for you to fall asleep, right? You may be in bed at 8 o'clock. Now, this is another thing that people don't realize. You can go to bed at 8 and wake up at 7 and think, oh, well, I got 11 hours of sleep. But that's not the case. It actually takes, there's a latency of how long it actually takes for your body to fall asleep. If you are one of those people that has a Whoop or a Fitbit, some sort of monitoring device that can measure your sleep, that's really helpful. Because a lot of the time, sometimes I will go to sleep and be like, oh, fantastic, I've slept. I look at the clock and then I check my Whoop and I've only slept 7.5 hours, even though I've been in bed for 9.5, right? So getting quality sleep is going to give us, number one, a great start, great energy boost in the morning, but it's also going to be allow us to have clarity in the mind, cognitive function, to be able to deal with anything that comes our way throughout the rest of the day. So if you can, again, like I said, if you are one of these people that are getting 5 to 6 hours of sleep, you have lots left on the table to optimize in terms of mood, in terms of energy levels, in terms of productivity. So give it a think. Again, no big jumps. I don't recommend ever saying, oh, I'm going to try and sleep 1 hour before, because realistically, that's not going to happen. When your body has been so used to a sleep cycle, you're going to have to take, maybe what I like to say or advise is take 15-minute increments. Say you sleep at 11. Your target is to get to 10 p.m. You want to sleep an hour earlier. So you start to go to bed 10:45. Maybe you do that for the first week or 3-4 days. Then you move it down to 10:30. Then 10:15. You need to give your body time to adjust, right? Nothing happens overnight. And I think if you have that mindset that you be a little bit patient with yourself and remove or take those increments little by little, you'll be able to fall asleep at a more optimal time and stay asleep for longer and have better quality sleep, which is two of them. The deep wave sleep, where the muscles really repair themselves. That's where muscle growth synthesis happens in the body. And REM sleep, so that's the rapid eye movement. That's when we're literally storing memories, things that we've learned back into the brain. So again, REM sleep and deep sleep are two really important sleep cycles that, kind of help us manage recovery when we sleep. Recovery basically happens at night, guys. So give yourself some grace. It's not lazy to go to sleep early. I love naps. If you're one of these people that cannot get 8 hours in a shot for whatever reason, work, kids, whatever, try and take a nap. Try and take a nap in the day. Yeah. It just helps reduce your sleep debt, because these things can add on. And you'll notice the less sleep you get over and over time, your cognitive function, among other things, will start to deteriorate. So that's the first one. Sleep, right, Andy? Andy, I think you're muted.
Yes, I am muted. Yeah. So the next thing is like stress management. I mean, obviously you have, the active recovery class. That's one like very good way of just de-stressing, down-regulating. I think you'll be a good person actually to touch on the topic of down-regulating and bringing your nervous system activity down. And hydration, I think touch on those two things, and then we can move on to the big topics that I have no idea about, which you'll have to.
Okay. So I mean,
take
hydration is another one. Just as important it is to feed our bodies, we also need to hydrate, right? One of the things that we get asked a lot is, well, how much water should I drink? Well, hydration, number one, is not just water. Water is sometimes, if you're just drinking water all the time, you're probably going to end up using the bathroom a lot, right? Because it's going to be sending yourself a signal. So we need to be making sure that we have those electrolytes. We have sodium specifically in water. So whether that's kind of sprinkling salt, Himalayan pink salt, into your water first thing in the morning. I prefer to just take an electrolyte. It's tastier, and it just makes sure I kind of drink all of it. Electrolytes will have magnesium, potassium, sodium in them in different varying quantities, so that you make sure that you're able to absorb that water. It's not just about getting that water, but getting into the bloodstream so that it can actually transport all those nutrients and start to repair whatever it needs to repair in the system, or just transport nutrients and take out waste, for example, from the body. So hydration is really big. We recommend 3 to 4 liters a day, but again, that's also going to depend on your size, right? If you're a bigger person, you're probably going to be consuming a little bit more water, just as you are going to be consuming food. So 60% of your body mass, right, in pounds, Andy, is a recommendation, if I'm not mistaken.
We will send the lifestyle guidebook to everyone after this is done. We have a calculation for how much water you should be drinking per day, so you can just plug in your numbers and figure out the calculation. It generally falls around 3 to 5 liters, depending on activity levels.
Yeah, and especially in Sri Lanka, because it's so humid here, ladies. Like, you literally step out of the bathroom and you're sweating, right? So those are things when, especially when you're sweating a lot and had a sweaty session with endurance, you need to make sure that you're also kind of drinking your water, sipping it throughout your session, and also making sure that you replenish everything that you lost right after your session. So that's going to keep you clear. It's also great for your skin, right? Ladies, if you're not drinking enough water, you're going to start to notice that your skin starts to get dry on your face, on your arms, on your hands. These are places where obviously exposed to the sun a lot. So you just need to be mindful that this can also help with just skin texture and just having it be plump and hydrated. So we've talked about sleep, we've talked about hydration, and we've talked a little bit about food. Talking about down regulation, I'm a big one on this because I just think I am in general a person that's a little bit elevated. I'm a little bit more, I have a little bit more energy. And so for me, I really try to avoid anything that stimulates me late into the evening. Apart from my Wednesday class, everybody knows this. Like, I don't want to have meetings. I don't want to do anything that uses my brain because I don't want to activate myself. I like to have a slow down routine. And for me, it could be anything from doing a breathing exercise. That's the first thing I do. If I find that I'm very in my head and I'm literally ruminating about all the things I haven't done, or, as you know, all the things you have left to do, the first thing is to focus on your breath. What I've realized is that a lot of people find staying still a problem. And I see this in my yoga classes when we ask to hold something or stay in Shavasana, and I see people fidgeting, right? This to me shows me that you are already kind of, your nervous system is what's the word, Andy, is
What's that when you're
stimulated. Sorry, your nervous system is stimulated. So
elevated?
you'll notice. So one of the first things I do, if I'm like, oh no, I'm literally finding it struggle to like switch off right now and wind down,
Sympathetic
is like,
is the word.
pardon?
You're thinking of
Stimulated.
sympathetic.
Sympathetic, yeah. So you're in your sympathetic. There are two areas to our nervous system. So there's the rest and digest, which is the parasympathetic nervous system, and then we also have the sympathetic nervous system, which is essentially our fight or flight. So anytime we need to act or go or do something, our nervous system will obviously operate. And also, just so you know, ladies, the ability to go between both these nervous system is also an indicator of health. Right? We don't want to be stuck in the parasympathetic nervous system where you're always kind of slumped, slow, too chill. And you also don't want to be in this high elevated sympathetic nervous system. But neither of these extremes work. Our body has to kind of balance what we call HRV, heart rate variability, that measures our ability to go between these two states well. And so when your HRV, for example, is high, it shows us that our body is in a state that when we need to rest, we're actually able to downregulate. So if you are somebody who finds that you're very stimulated when you get back from work, I would suggest finding a corner of your room. Like I have, this is my office, and this is also my space where I practice my breathing and my yoga. So I will just turn on the lights. I like to light my incense oil. Again, I want to get out of my head. So what I try to do is start to switch off all these external stimuli, right? Switch off the lights, cool down the room. I usually will light something. So, again, smell is a very great indicator to bring you back to a place, right? And then I start to breathe. And it's literally the best way. There are two ways that we can kind of help downregulate the system. One is kind of breathing in for a count of 4. And then we want to exhale the breath for a count of 6, right? So when we expire or exhale for longer, that brings us back to our nervous system. It brings us back into our parasympathetic nervous system, which tells us, all right, you are safe. It is time for you to rest. Then your body can go back and do the things that it needs to do to repair, to digest the food that you've just eaten. Because let's be honest, you know that when you've just come out of a workout, sometimes, Najima just said this, you can't eat right away. That's because you're still in the sympathetic nervous system. We got to wait for that heart rate to get back down till we get some food into our body to be able to see the benefits of this. So breathing is a big one. Another way that I like to do it naturally is you can go out for a walk. Right. People don't take advantage of the fact that, we also have really good weather. So being able to kind of go outside for a walk, it helps us kind of shut off from what we're going on because we're in nature. Grounding, if you've heard about grounding, being able to be barefoot on grass, has just this grounding effect where we're literally reconnecting with nature. I mean, we are part of the universe, guys, right? So when we try to disconnect sometimes, and we feel this sense of dysregulation in our system, really try getting back into nature. There is nothing as healing as being in the ocean, as being by lots of greenery. That's so healing to our bodies. So breathing, being out in nature. Another thing is, I know sometimes kids can be stressed, but they can also be a source of joy, right? Moments with your kids can be really, really helpful to making you feel connected, to making you feel calmer, spending time with close ones, with pets even. All of these activities can help us really get out of our head and start to just feel a little bit calmer and allow us to kind of get into this cycle of coming down and getting ready for bed. I hope that makes, there's a lot more to go to. I mean, breathing in itself is a whole topic. It's something that I also like to do at the end of some of my active recovery classes, specifically in the evenings. You'll notice that we do a 4-minute breathing exercise. And it literally is this 4-second inhale and a 6-second exhale. So you can either exhale through the nose, but if you find that difficult to control the exhale for such a long period of time, try and just pretend you're blowing out of a straw. Try do that. To be honest with you, that breathing strategy also works when you're stressed. So if that's something that you struggle with and you're overwhelmed at work, just come back to it and just focus on the breathing and just try and calm it down. That's the immediate way to impact the nervous system. Another one is called the psychological sigh, where we breathe in. So it's 2 breaths. So we inhale for a count of maybe 3, and then take a quick one. Excuse me, I have a blocked nose, so obviously it's not going to work very well. But if you don't have a blocked nose, you can try it, because this, again, this psychological sigh essentially allows us to kind of, that last inhale to bring in the air helps us kind of reopen up the tiny little alveoli. That's the tiny little things in the lungs that help us kind of breathe, right? They expand so that we get that oxygen in, and then they obviously converts to carbon dioxide as it goes through the body, exhales it out. So we want to be able to find breathing techniques that help calm us down at night. And like I said, try not to watch stimulating things. Netflix at night is probably not good for you trying to go to bed.
All right. Shall we segue into the other topics? So
Yes. So this is specifically about
so my next thing was, one of the biggest questions that came up on the poll that we did was, now we know that the menstrual cycle has low hormone and high hormone phases, right? And energy levels fluctuate during these phases. Could you run through kind of how
a biology
ladies
lesson, is
can
it?
go through, right?
The biology lesson of the menstrual cycle. Yes, I will run through it. So
and how the ladies can go through knowing how to adjust training based on how they feel and what phase that they're in.
okay,
Yeah.
makes sense. So ladies, I mean, just in general, I don't know how in tune you are with your menstrual cycle. For those of us that do still have it, essentially the menstrual cycle is basically can range, and it varies from women, from a 25-day cycle to a 30-day cycle, right? Just for ease of conversation and explaining, I'm just going to split this 30 days into a high. So let's take the first 2 weeks as, a low hormone. So essentially the first day of your period for the next 14 days is when we are at the low up. Sex hormones, which is essentially estrogen and progesterone, are going to be at their lowest. What that means is that we are probably closest to men in terms of our physiology then, because we don't have these estrogen and progesterone doing this dance to help support the egg, right? This is the time when you get your period, when we have the highest amount of energy and our body can take on strain. Why? Because these estrogen is not affecting our energy levels and the way that we utilize energy. You will also notice during the second half of your menstrual cycle, let's call this the high hormone phase. This is essentially the follicular phase where, the luteal phase, where what's going to happen is we will start to see estrogen start to rise. And the reason estrogen starts to rise is because it's going to help support that ovary coming out, right? So now we have to understand, as women, physiologically, right, this is literally what we were meant to do. So meant to do in the sense that this is the reproductive cycle. We are the only sex that has this, right? And so when we look at the point at which 2 weeks before you get your period, you will probably notice that you are sluggish, tired, probably irritable, right? These PMS, normal premenstrual syndrome, like you get irritable, you've got slight mood swings, you've got sugar cravings, and there's reasons for that. Essentially, during the stage where we've released an egg, our body is wholeheartedly putting all its energy into getting this egg to fertilize, right? So now here we have the uterine lining wall starting to build. This is also why we start to feel like we're bloating. It's literally where the uterine wall starts to support the embedding of an embryo so that we can start to develop growing a baby, for example. So this is why we feel during this stage when our body is working hard to make sure that this egg goes through the ovary, you know, the ovaries get released and then goes through the fallopian tube, whatnot. It's working hard to prepare us for that. You will notice, ladies, a disruption in sleep. You might notice that our core body temperature goes up. The moment our core body temperature goes up, this is initially why we find disruptions in sleep, right? Like I said, in order for our body to fall asleep and to stay asleep, we need to at least drop, our body temperature needs to drop at least about 2 degrees in order to get to that sleep state. So again, these disruptions in, or this elevation in hormone causes us, let me just talk about it a little bit here, where number one, we're getting sleepless nights. Sleepless nights also means that when we train, we're going to find it hard to recover from that training. Again, let me just talk to you about, like, sleep is the holy grail of recovery. And if we're not getting that every night, in those 7 to 14 days, you'll see your sleep start to decline. We're not recovering well. When we're not sleeping well and we're not recovering well, we're probably going to make worse food choices, right? So we're probably going to give into those sugar cravings that you're like, I want that cake because anyways, you're tired but wired, right? We want to get that quick energy. So these are things hormone related that many women during this 2 weeks before their period are going to start to feel. What are the things that we can do to help? Is that we have to be mindful that our recovery is impacted during this stage. So for me personally, I don't do, and again, I don't want to blanket say that this is wrong, because again, this is my personal experience. I don't enjoy endurance or anything that is too high intensity. Number one, I don't feel I can keep up with the workout because I'm just overall tired. There is a sense of sluggishness. Our body is bloating. We are retaining a little bit more water again because of this hormone fluctuations during these times. And so I tend to stay with strength training. Again, strength training is not, there's cardiovascular strain. So a lot of the time when we get on the machines, we're using a lot of heavy breathing, right? We're going to need to be able to breathe to get the oxygen to kind of transport that to the working muscles. I will avoid that kind of workouts, and I will, not that I avoid it, I just maybe will tone down on it. So if I'm waking up tired and I'm already feeling sluggish and the effects of like getting my period is coming in 3 days, I will focus a little bit more on a longer warm up, mobility, and then work on strength. And that's not to say I can't push on strength, but that's generally what I like to do that works for me. There was recently a report from somebody I follow she's also an exercise physiologist. Her name is Dr. Liz. Some of these people that I follow and get information, that there are neuroscientists and exercise physiologists, will share this information with you because I think it's very, very important that you guys also do research on your own to kind of find strategies that also help you. But she basically said that even though people like to change their workouts, so some people will say, oh, I'd like to avoid this during my luteal phase, or on my period, I'll avoid this. They saw in this research that high intensity workouts were actually quite beneficial for ladies in this luteal phase. Again, there were very many parameters to this particular exercise, so I'll maybe share it with you guys and you can do a little bit of research on it. But I would say, general rule of thumb, start tracking your cycle. I've been tracking my menstrual cycle since I wanted to conceive with my son. It's been he's 5 years. I've been tracking it for 6 years. So even with this data, I can even go to a doctor and I can literally track to see when my period was coming, for literally the last 6 years. Our menstrual cycle, ladies, whilst everybody has them, we are also going to find there's general recommendations, but we're also going to find that maybe not one size fits all for everybody. So I don't want to put my opinions and my experiences on you guys. I want you guys to kind of test it for yourself and see how you feel. When I get my period, usually the first day I'm usually kind of sluggish, so I'll allow myself to rest a little bit more, in the sense that I'm not going to push myself during workouts. But usually from the second day onwards, I can push. And when I say I can push, I feel strong. I feel strong in my body. My mind feels strong. Like I know that I can very confidently take on an endurance workout and be able to recover for my next session. So what's really important to know is that the 2 weeks leading up to your period, when all these hormones are rising, your recovery is down. Your sleep is compromised. Your immune system, ladies, are compromised. So what we need to understand is that, do you want to add more stress to that? Right? We talk about consistency and stuff at the gym, but this is where I try to tell ladies, especially ladies that I work with from a postpartum point of view, is that you need to learn to listen to your body. What are the signs? You can't push when there's nothing to give. And just, you can say, yeah, we got to show up. Andy says consistency, but you also need to come to a point in your life where you are testing things for yourself and you're actually kind of evaluating if they work for you. When it comes to meal timings, types of food that you're eating, don't just take our recommendation for it. Try it for yourself. See what works for you. Again, these are all very big, broad, general recommendations. So even when it comes to exercising on your period, ladies, I do it. I don't think I have ever, I've heard some people ask in class, oh, is it bad to work out on your period? And my first question is, why? Like, are you having cramps? Like, is there something stopping you? And if there isn't, then why not get your workout in? There's nothing detrimental to that. I think it's probably an old wives' tale, maybe where they say that you shouldn't work on your period, or you shouldn't get into inversions when you're on your period, or do handstands on your period. But personally, in my experience, I've not felt anything negative from working out on the period. In fact, I find that it helps my mood. It definitely helps my mood. It definitely gets just blood flowing and just a little bit of movement in the body, so you're not so stiff. So yeah, there is, if for those of you ladies that were wondering if it's okay to work out on your period, it's completely fine. Again, if you're having terrible period pains, also know that your uterine wall, it's a muscle, ladies, right? So when we are shedding, which is literally when we get our period, when we start to bleed, our uterine wall starts to contract to shed this. So if you are not hydrated, many people talk about periodic cramping. This is going to get worse. If you've ever tried to work out dehydrated, you know that your workout's going to be crap. You're not going to be feeling good. Your muscles, nothing's really going to be sliding as well, moving as well. We're not going to be able to hit that range of motion. The same applies for when we get our period, and how important it is to hydrate, because if we're not, you are going to have that pain receptor in your uterus telling you that all these cramps hurt, and they're probably going to feel to you like they hurt more when you're dehydrated. So if it's the one thing to say in that week up to your period, make sure you're really dialing in your hydration. And I'm not, again, just talking about water. I'm talking about you adding your electrolytes in, to make sure that you're actually getting the absorption into the body, and it's not just kind of staying in your gut and going to your kidneys and then you end up peeing it out, right? Really, really
We have a
important.
question. We have a question on this. Is it okay to do handstands and ab work on your period? I've had some people tell me not to.
I'd like to know why. So I'll be honest with you, ladies. I was told during my yoga teacher training that generally we try to avoid getting into a handstand or doing inversions. And so I just kind of took that for truth. Now, again, if we don't question certain things, we just take it for truth, right? There's a lot of things that they say, oh, don't move your knee past your toes. How many of you guys have heard that? Don't hurt your knee by, don't ever let your knees pass your toes. There are certain recommendations, and I even say this from a yoga standpoint, where what you're cueing doesn't make sense to me. I was doing handstands. And again, if you don't want to do it, you don't have to. I understand, like, fair enough. If you're not wearing a tampon, if you're wearing a pad, then things might get a little bit messy. I understand. But generally, I didn't find that it affected my practice. I've done handstand push-ups during my period. It was fine. I didn't feel any difference. So really, again, instead of just taking everything for truth, what people say, and even and this is why I even say, for me, like, you guys need to kind of find out what works for you. We're giving you general recommendations and guidelines, but every single person here is probably going to have something, maybe even food allergies for that matter, so that wouldn't work for another person. So test it on yourself, see for yourself how it works for you. But generally, there is no issue with doing core work or handstands, in my opinion. Sorry, who asked the question? If you don't mind, who told you that?
Anju.
Oh, so
Anju.
Anju, if you won't mind telling, like, who was it that advised you not to? Was it was it a doctor? Was it like, I'm just curious. Was it a friend?
Okay, so that's me.
Hi.
Yeah, hi. This is Andrew. So yeah, basically the knees above, over toes were definitely a doctor. And yeah, several people in my past. Yeah, so that's
Okay.
just kind of been a thing that, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, you'll damage some part of your body and never be able to reproduce. But
Yeah, I know.
that
So
kind of
these are the
thing.
things that doctors tell us. And, to be honest, times we have to look at where we're asking the advice from. When I asked my doctor, well, I've just given birth. She took me for my 6-week consultation, and she's like, "Oh, you're good to start exercising." I'm in the industry, and I was like, "What do you mean I'm good to start exercising?" She's like, "Oh, just avoid core work." That was so vague to me. What do you mean avoid core work, right? And then again, I spoke to Andy about this, and what I realized is, like, I love my doctor, I love my OBGYN, but she's not trained for that stuff, right? She's there as an obstetrician to help you deliver your baby and keep you healthy during that period of your life. She's not there, and she hasn't got training to rehab you back into what you were doing before. So when you are trying to speak to people, you might need to go to somebody who's a specialist, because people will give you general advice like, "Oh, don't let the knees pass the toes. Don't do this, don't do that." And really, it's coming from a place of, I'm sorry, but it's a lack of knowledge. It's out of their scope of work. Same thing, like if you'd asked me to prescribe you a nutritional diet, I couldn't do that. I'm not a certified nutrition. I can give you general advice on, percentages of protein and stuff. But if you were going into the nitty gritty and saying, "Well, Lexi, I have this and this concern," I can't go down and tell you this is the exact milligram of this type of, item that you should be eating. So really, where you get your advice, this is also why I wanted to give you ladies some resources at the end, because I want you guys to have science and evidence-backed information and not be hearing old wives' tale, right? Because if I had listened to that, I wouldn't have exercised during my pregnancy. Because what do they tell you in Sri Lanka when you're pregnant? Rest. Don't live things about 10 pounds. What if you have a toddler and your toddler weighs 20 pounds and you have to carry your toddler? I mean, it really is advice that is coming from a place of a lack of knowledge, basically. So my advice that you ladies is go to the people who know. And if we are not that, we can either refer you to somebody else, but you don't always have to kind of take something for truth if that wasn't your personal experience with it. Thank you,
Cool.
Anju, for that.
Any questions on this specific topic before we move on to the next one? And it'll be a quick finish from here, actually.
Yeah, we're just going to come into, I think the biggest one here was perimenopause and training. So we've kind of perimenopause, and then there was also PCOS over there. So when we come to perimenopause, ladies, so just to define what perimenopause is, we go through all the stages of hormonal variations in our system from puberty. The next one is going to be pregnancy postpartum. And then, of course, we get to the stage in our life where clinically we are not fertile, right? That's called menopause. And menopause, the clinical definition is when you've gone 12 consecutive months since you've had no period, no menstrual cycle. Doesn't matter if you've gone 8 months and then after 8 months you got your period, that means you're back in perimenopause. Menopause is clinically defined as 12 months, consecutive months of no menstrual cycle. The period that happens between menopause is called perimenopause, and that is a stage. And in this stage, a lot of things are happening. And again, as Andy mentioned at the very, very beginning of this call, a lot of the studies that have been done on health and fitness have been done on men. It's only been in recent times, in the last 10 years, are we starting to see more research coming out on women and women's specific health issues, and specifically when it comes to menopause. How many of you have heard that, menopause, end of your life, life is over, there's nothing else we can do, we go through these life changes, they say, ladies go a little bit crazy. But did you know that during perimenopause, we are again going through a situation where estrogen, which is one of the primary sex hormones, start to do a steady decline. Now, perimenopause can last anywhere from 8 months, it can last up to 8 years, right? So this is going to be different for different women. Something that I consulted with my OBGYN, because I started 2 years ago. I am 40, going to be 41 this year, ladies. So 2 years ago, when I was 39, I started to notice, number one, sleep disruptions. So I wear a Whoop, and I've been wearing it for 3 years. So again, this is why I kind of have data to kind of also back up what I'm feeling in real life. I started to notice sleep was just not very good. The time that I spent in sleep was much less. My restorative sleep, where, the body's recovering and you're kind of sorting your mind, your thoughts, your memories, that had decreased. And I started to get night sweats. So that was a big one for me, like getting a little bit sweaty at night. Mood swings, a lot of mood swings. My husband will probably attest to that, as well as low energy availability. So what we need to understand is that you may already, in your late 30s, already be getting these symptoms. And I'm just going to read some of these symptoms out again, just so that if you are somebody who's wondering if you're already experiencing these, maybe you are, right? And if somebody says to you, oh, no way, again, this book is amazing. Read it, because what it tells you, and the first thing my doctor said to me was like, there's no way that you're experiencing perimenopause. And the first thing in my head was like, how does she know that, right? I'm the one experiencing this. And it wasn't until I started researching and reading a little bit more that I realized, hey, you can actually start getting perimenopausal symptoms in your mid-30s. You can get, so menstrual cycle changes. These are some of the symptoms when we go into perimenopause. Your cycle length will start to change. Your bleeding will either get much heavier or even much lighter. You're going to get hot flashes. I've started to get some of those as well, where I just feel like my body is burning up. I can't quite explain it. It just feels like it's heating up from the inside. Like I mentioned before, shifts in your sleep-wake cycle, cognitive function, so your ability to focus, having this constant brain fog, and then mood changes. You're anxious, you're feeling depressed, you're feeling maybe a little bit irritable. What I would say is, if you are a lady at CrossFit Salon, one of the things that we usually hear people recommend is that strength training is so key in helping us through this stage of life. We want to maintain muscle mass. Again, once we start to decline in estrogen, it's going to be harder for us to, not to say to make muscle, but you have to be a little bit more intentional and focused with it. So making sure that you're continuing to come in for your strength training 3 times a week, right? Another thing we want to see is you're going to limit your caffeine and alcohol. I don't know how many of you are huge coffee drinkers, but this is something that is also going to affect your ability to sleep, right? Try and keep your caffeine to before noon. Limit alcohol. Okay, that's a huge sleep disruptor. Again, it really messes up with the hydration. Make sure you're getting some sort of daily movement in. And at this stage, ladies, we really have to prioritize rest and recovery. And it's not about being lazy. It's really about you understanding that your body is going through these changes. Some of these changes you're not going to have as much control of, right? But what do we do to kind of stay sane? How do we ensure that we're able to kind of meet the challenges of going through perimenopause, while trying to be ourselves and trying to keep up with our family and trying to keep everything just rolling over there? Is we really need to prioritize quality sleep. So it's not getting it. So if you're not getting your sleep at night, we need to try and get that nap in during the day. Again, it doesn't matter whether you're, postpartum or you're, sleep again is so important, but especially with perimenopause, when those hormones are really starting to affect our sleep, we need to be able to get that in as and when we can, because that's going to really help with the recovery of muscles, but also with helping us with our cognitive function and mood, if that makes sense. The other thing I wanted to say is that just recently, as part of my quest to kind of find out about my body and what exactly is happening with my hormone level, and that's been fluctuating the last 2 years, I've just joined the Health Reset program at Vida. So I just had a consultation with Dr. Burhan there, where I kind of explained to him what I've been noticing. And I think it's really important to see if we have any nutrition deficiencies, right? I don't want to just supplement for the sake of supplementing. Number one, it's a waste of money because supplements can be really expensive. And also, if we already have something in our body that we don't need, it's just becoming waste. It's just getting put out through waste product, through sweat, urine, feces, whatever it is. So what I want you to think about is exploring, getting your blood work, finding out where you have deficiencies. Okay, is it iron? Is it calcium? Is it sodium? Whatever it is. Help yourself, help your body. Don't be guessing to do this stuff. Look at the blood work, speak to a doctor and see where you can help supplement to at least get you to a point where you're able to function. Nizreen, I think, had a question about, sorry, I just saw somebody put a comment, Andy, not sure what that,
Sorry.
Okay, was that something that I needed to address?
It's off topic. It's about caffeine.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's not important whenever it becomes relevant. I mean, whenever the question, you're typing. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Andy's typing. Okay. But again, ladies, so these are just things that we want to make sure that in this season of perimenopause, that if you are already a member at CrossFit Salon, you are already on the right track, because you are definitely getting your strength training in. But what's really important, ladies, is that when you're hitting your strength training, I want to come back to this, are you guys lifting heavy enough? That's another thing I see with the ladies, especially in my Sculpt and Burn class. I will most likely always bump up the weight for them if they're showing me that they can actually manage that movement mechanics well enough. What is heavy enough? That's a really good question, Anju. So what we like to use, and I'm not sure whether you're familiar with this, but we have what we call a chart called RPE. It stands for Rate of Perceived Exertion. This, we give it to everybody because everybody comes from different fitness levels. An 8 to me might feel like a 5 for Andy, for example. So we always want to work with an individual's rate of effort. We like to be lifting at an 8 RPE. And what that means is that if I were to do, 10 reps of something or whatnot at a certain weight, I was performing those 10 reps at really good form, that I have 2 more reps in reserve. What does that mean, right? Is that if push comes to shove and I said, Andrew, you need to do 12 reps right now, that you would be able to perform those last 2 reps, so the 10 reps and then the last 2 with good form before you hit failure. Am I right to say that, Andy? Am I explaining that correctly? A lot of the time, what we'll see is that we pick ladies with tiny dumbbells and it's moving really fast. And ladies, with movement, we want to slow things down. That's why we program a lot of tempo work at CrossFit Salon. We're going to get stronger at tempo. We're slowing things down. We're resisting gravity. We're trying to get really in tune with that movement pattern and control of that load. we will have coaches, come up and say, well, this person prefers not to bulk up. But again, we have to think about the fact that most of us are under eating already, right? So how are you going to build muscle mass if you are under eating? So really, it's more than thinking about, oh, I'm really worried about bulking up. Take that out of your head, because that's really not, or should not be, the first thing we should worry about, because that's not going to happen overnight. When you are picking weights 1 week, and if you are like, oh, I could only do 2 more reps, I'm almost going to fail, I can only do 2 more, or I could only do 2 more, then you're at the right weight, right? Sometimes we may go too heavy, and that's okay. Sometimes I'll tell the ladies in my class, go with a heavier weight. If in the first 2 sets you can perform that weight, but you're not able to in the 3rd set, instead of using shitty movement patterns, drop the weight. You're still getting that same stimulus, but you're keeping with that movement pattern and that rep count. So there are ways to kind of look at it, but mostly in general, most women are not lifting heavy enough. And my husband will also attest to this, because there's so many times that we used to train together that he would like, Lex, that is not your max. I'm pretty sure. So, a lot of the coaches can immediately tell how fast you move an external load, if that really is your 8 or 9 RPE. So Andrew, if you think that you're going light, you probably are. I always tell the ladies that. If you think you are, and you're questioning if you need to go with a higher weight, hit the higher weight. There's nothing wrong with that. The gym is literally where we test all this out.
I'd like to chime in on that. Basically, the only way there's going to be a true change is through the organism being stressed, right? And so there's what's called the stimulus to fatigue ratio, right? And so there has to be enough stimulus to fatigue the entire organism for there to be any reason for it to change. The body loves homeostasis. It loves to stay where it's at, right? That's why it's much easier to stay muscular once you're muscular than it is to get muscular, right? It's much easier to stay lean once you've already got lean, right? The changes are what are difficult. And so and one of the things that it's such a common obstacle. It's like, oh, I don't want to get bulky. And usually I'll challenge people and say, listen, get as bulky as you can. And if you want to go back, it's much easier to just lose all that muscle, because you could do that in like 2 months, right? You could get super skinny in a couple of months, right? But you won't get jacked. You're not going to sneeze and get jacked by mistake, right? And so I would actually encourage you to get as muscular as possible, because it's so easy to get skinny again, right? And so it's you need to put a lot of stress on the organism, and the RPE is just kind of like this subjective way to kind of know, I could have done 1 rep, and then put a gun to your head, you could probably do 5. You put a gun to your head, you probably could do 10. A good way to kind of do this is one day go into the gym. It could be in class, it could be out of class. Put a moderate weight on the bar, and you're going to do 1 set, and you're going to leave the gym. So let's say you're squatting, you're going to do a back squat. Put 60% or 70% of your back squat on the bar, and that will be the only set you do for the day. And you're going to do that to true utter failure. And you're going to find out how much you're actually leaving in the tank when you go into the gym and train, right? And so it's a really good way, just do 1 AMRAP set. You can choose a day of the week, choose a day of the month, and say, okay, today I'm going to go in, I'm going to put 95 pounds in the bar, and I'm going to squat till I literally cannot squat anymore. And then I'm going to leave the gym. You're going to do 1 set. And that's a very, very simple way. And we'll probably put it in the program at some point, right? But it's very hard to get people to come to the gym for 1 set. And so we have to kind of sneak it in there, right? And so it's a very good way, because what we'll often find is when we prescribe this kind of this 1 AMRAP set, is people do 10, 15, sometimes 20 reps more than their perceived rate of their 9 RPE, what they perceive as their 9 RPE. And so I would try that one day. Pick a movement that you're efficient in and you're comfortable with and you're confident with, right? And for some people it's a squat, for some people it's a push-up, for some people it's lunges, for some people it's deadlifts. I wouldn't do deadlifts, actually. I'd probably do squats or some sort of upper body movement and see what that true I think squats is the best, because it makes you actually mentally fine. And so I would try that to really identify what your true max is. Yeah. Shall we move on to
the last questions? I think
Yeah,
Pardon?
there was the last very common, and I think we'll make this the last topic, is PCOS, right? Basically, for for some people that don't know what PCOS is, it's linked to insulin resistance, high androgen levels, causes weight gains, irregular cycles, um, and I don't know your experience with it, Alexei, but we've had a few people come into the gym that have struggled with this. I know my sisters both have PCOS, and so I've been working with them on it for quite a little bit. But could you touch on that as a last subject that we?
So I'm not sure how many of you know what. So it basically is polycystic ovarian syndrome, right? So this is a hormonal issue that can affect women, and a lot of women are affected by this. And there isn't really a cure, so to speak. It's all about managing of symptoms, right? So I think I personally don't struggle with this. So I also had to speak to Andy because this has not been my personal experience. But I do have friends that have struggled with this, struggle with the weight gain. Obviously, facial hair, because there's also a release of testosterone there that's kind of messing up with the hormones. So just energy levels, and just not being able to lose weight, right? Seemingly, no matter what they do. I think it's a lot more, I think, nuanced in terms of this is not a one size fit all. I think in a sense, this is a situation where you'll, number one, have to work with your OBGYN. You probably need to work with an endocrinologist as well, somebody who kind of monitors hormones, and a dermatologist. So it's not a fact that you can just go to one person to kind of figure this out, because this is literally about managing your symptoms. Specifically, what they do recommend for ladies, with PCOS, for example, is the same exact protocols that we're telling you guys, which is sleep, right? Make sure that you're eating nutrient dense food and making sure that you get your macronutrients in. Managing stress is a big one as well. Andy, if I'm not mistaken, we've also talked about the fact that we need to improve insulin sensitivity, because
Yeah.
this is literally the main factor of why they have this ballooning weight and they're not able to control it, right?
Yeah. I think the biggest factor from what I've understood and what I've actually working with Vida and the doctors at Vida is insulin sensitivity is the biggest issue, right? Most people who have PCOS almost always are insulin resistant. It just goes hand in hand. And so there's a couple of ways you can improve insulin sensitivity. The first thing is strength training. Everything always comes back to strength training, regardless of what muscle mass and everything that muscle mass does seems to be positive long term. Obviously, there's a point of diminishing returns in terms of muscle mass, but strength training is one. VO2 max training is the other, right? And VO2 max training is basically your body's ability to transport oxygen. Its highest ability. How much oxygen can your body deliver in very high intensity environments, right? And so a good protocol to work on VO2 max is 3 minutes of work on any machine at the highest output manageable, rest about 3 minutes and repeat for about 3 to 5 sets, right? And that's a good way to really start working on your VO2 max. That's the second thing. So strength training, VO2 max training, or high intensity interval training, that word gets thrown around a lot, but high intensity interval training is not the way it's usually prescribed. Is not actually high intensity interval training, because it becomes low intensity dragged out training generally. And so you want to have 3 minutes of work, 3 minutes of rest. You're almost completely coming to rest, and your heart rate is going to touch peak about 85 to 90% and higher, right? So the effort on a VO2 max training session is monumentally difficult. And so some people have to ease their way up to building those kind of qualities in their training. But strength training, VO2 max training, and a low GI diet, those are three things I'm working on with my sisters on right now. Those are the recommendations. Generally, most doctors, if they're working with polycystic ovarian syndrome, is they're going to get you to strength train, start getting you to lower stress, obviously, and then put you on a low GI diet. And that's basically eating a diet high in protein and low in processed carbohydrates, right? So
just a quick one. I think there was Melissa that kind of mentioned something about, there was also conflicting reports saying that HIIT is not really good. I think there's something Andy brought up. when we talk about HIIT training, high intensity interval training, this is very loosely thrown around, just like the word CrossFit is thrown around. Now you see this as boot camp. They'll say, oh, we're doing high intensity training and it's a boot camp circuit type training. Ladies, that is not high intensity training. When you define high intensity training, you are literally working at zone 5, which is max output, right? You are either going to be doing a bike, a rower, or running. These are the only ways that you're going to hit your real pure sprint, high intensity interval training. It's through these 3 modes: running, biking, rowing. So if you're seeing people do these things, jumping up and down, whilst there are benefits of that type of exercise, that is not true high intensity interval training. So let me then go back to you. That's moderate intensity training. You are never going to hit those high numbers doing those jump things and, I don't know, mountain climbers and all of that. So let's not confuse what real high intensity training is. And I say this because I've actually programmed in my Sculpt and Burn class, Sculpt and Burn class, where we have a 30-second, max effort in 30 seconds. And then we have a 1 minute off, and then we do it 14 rounds. Like, obviously I'd like to give a little bit of a longer rest period in the next cycle so that I can see them hitting, again, those numbers. But what I also already see is those ladies are not actually able to hit zone 5. And again, I think it's because they're not eating well, or they're not fueling well enough for that workout. Does that,
and you probably have not, you probably also have not developed the qualities to be able to deliver oxygen that fast. And so generally in zone 5 training, it takes a few weeks to actually peak max heart rate. You probably get there for a couple of minutes. I noticed Melissa said that she goes to zone 5 doing endurance for a few minutes, right? Generally, when you're exhausted and your body's like, oh my God, we need to, drive the heart rate up to deliver oxygen to these muscles because we're still moving. Really, you want to get into zone 5 within a couple of minutes and hang out there, right? And so generally what happens with, this word high intensity interval training, like it's thrown around. Intensity is not a feeling, right? It's objective. It's objective. It's a percentage of effort. It's a percentage of your max. So high intensity would be 90% and above of your maximal effort, right? So if I could squat 100 pounds, high intensity would be 90 pounds, not 50 pounds for hundreds of reps, right? That would be just considered muscular endurance. But if we're looking at intensity, we're actually looking at the percentage of effort. And so 90%, I would say 90% and more of your max effort. So imagine you're going for a run, right? Imagine running for 90% effort for 3 minutes. Almost nobody probably on this call, if they're not already a runner, can do that. Because at about a minute, you're going to be peaked. You'll hit zone 3, zone 4, and there's such an inability to deliver oxygen to the required muscle groups that you'll just zonk and stop. And so it is a constant progress, just like trying to get stronger at lifting weights heavier or lifting heavier weights. Even building to be able to hit zone 5 is this steady progression that needs to happen, right? And so just imagine a maximal effort and holding it for about 3 minutes. It's hard, right? And so that is what true zone 5 is. Most high intensity interval training that is promoted or marketed is promoting intensity as a feeling and not a prescription, right? And so I would try to, now that you know this, you're going to see it everywhere. You're like, that's not high intensity. That's not high intensity.
Right. And also, ladies, if you really want to track it, you need to be wearing one of these, right? You need to be wearing some sort of device that's measuring your heart rate, because your high intensity, like Andy was saying, your zone 5, your heart rate is literally in max. You're literally at your 90 to 100%. So, being able to know what zones you're training at as well, can really help. And speaking to that, I think, Melissa, when you were talking about maybe this high intensity is something to avoid, I think really the misconception is that they've taken what is not high intensity, it's boot camp and circuit training, as high and labeled it high intensity. But really, in fact, you're working out at moderate intensity, which means you are raising cortisol, but you're not getting those benefits of the post-exercise stress that you want because you're not hitting those high intensities, if that makes sense. It's
an intense experience. That's what it is. So that's really how it's a very fine line, but you want to categorize intensity as a percentage of effort, right? And like high intensity would be considered like zone 5 would be like 90% and above. Um, a good place to actually try getting to
Endurance
that
lab.
is the run club.
Wow.
Right, if you go to run club Wednesday morning, that's a good place to really practice, because we prescribe zone 5 intervals a lot inside of that run club, because it's very easy to get to zone 5 running, because it's just hard. Running is hard. And so if you're trying to kind of get a gauge on what that feels like, I would try the run club on Wednesday. That'd be a good class to go and test it out. Yeah, and so sorry, what I was going to finish off was, so strength training, high intensity in, well, I don't want to say that, but VO2 max training and a low GI diet, high in proteins. I'm actually like working on that with my sisters right now, and so we are seeing some progress. But I think we still don't know too much about it. I think it's still a very it's an ongoing thing that is suddenly become very common in the world.
Yeah.
And
But
there are many.
honestly, Melissa, like it really helps when you give us feedback, right? Because at the end of the day, like we're all in this together. We have not just you, but we're going to have other members that come in with the same condition, and kind of sharing this information and what works for you and what hasn't, I think really creates a platform for all of us to learn and grow together, right? We don't have to kind of suffer in silence. We have people that we can kind of chat to and figure out solutions, whether it's from a medical standpoint or your own personal experience, for example. Andy, sorry, I did want to run by something. I had 2 questions regarding breastfeeding. So I know this is completely off topic, because we've had a lot of discussions, a lot of on the women's section. The one thing I did forget to add, sorry, when I'm talking about perimenopausal women, when we did talk, Andy talked about the strength training, being able to, make sure that we prioritize rest and sleep. One of the 3 things that we want to think about is, sorry about that, is heavy resistance training, which we've covered, high intensity interval training, which we've also just covered, but we also want to practice impact training. What is that? Jump training, right? Constant impact. And I'm not talking about here when we're jumping, maybe doing a few skips. What I'm talking about is like when we're doing jumping squats, box jumps, where there's actual impact on the skeletal system. Because again, as we know, during perimenopause, we are more likely to be able to have the loss of calcium, loss of bone density. So we want to be able to have stimulus for bone growth when everything else is kind of working against us. So those are the 3 things, sorry, I wanted to recap on in terms of training through perimenopause and menopause, is to make sure that you get those 2 types of training into your workout schedule at some point. We had one more question regarding pregnancy, exercising. How does exercise affect breastfeeding? I think for this question, I'm just going to be very quick, because I'm not sure if we've had any pregnant woman on here. Oh, well, maybe we had one. Yes. Okay. So let me just start with, ladies, that there were 2 questions. First was, how does exercising affect breastfeeding? And the second was, are you able to lose weight when breastfeeding? Okay, I want to start first with exercising affecting breastfeeding. There's really not much in terms of, if you're worried about lactic acid buildup and stuff like that, that's not something you have to worry about if that's what your concern is, if you're breastfeeding and lactic acid will pass on to the baby. I don't think we're going to be working out at that intensity to build lactic acid, number one, like in that sense. But what is more important that I usually tell the breastfeeding mamas that I work with postpartum is that, we need the energy that's required for milk production on a daily basis is about 500 to 550 calories. What that is literally the metabolic demands on your system is like that you're running 7 miles every day. I want you guys to think about that. Okay. The metabolic demand for a woman to produce breast milk to feed your newborn is literally you running 7 miles, not walking, ladies, running 7 miles a day. That's a lot of energy required from your body to feed your baby. So very, very important. Considerations when you are exercising. There's nothing wrong with exercising during breastfeeding. However, two things you need to make sure is that you are recovering. You are fueling your body after exercise, not just for your own recovery, but also because you have to produce milk and hydration. Again, water, right? Water, electrolytes. We need to get that back in the system. Hydration, nutrition, very important after your exercise, regardless of whether you've had a baby or not, but more importantly, when you are breastfeeding, because you have to sustain. That's literally, what your baby is kind of surviving on for the first couple of weeks if you aren't already supplementing with formula. So that was the first one. Be kind to yourself. Okay. So are you able to lose weight when breastfeeding? I think this leads in very quickly, because as I said, it takes about 500 to 550 calories to produce a breast milk for a day. So if you're thinking about it, you are obviously burning fat as you're producing breast milk. It's wonderful. When you breastfeed as well, your uterus starts to contract back to its, to its pre-baby size. So there are so many benefits to just being able to look at what a wonderful thing our body can do. Again, I'm not pro breastfeeding or whatnot. If you are breastfeeding and you supplement formula, hey, do you, because you just need to get that baby fed and you need to keep a sane mind. So just know that you are able to lose weight and it naturally happens over time, but I do not recommend going on a calorie deficit. At the end of the day, when you want to lose weight, it's all about the calorie deficit, right? That you are expending more than you are eating. But this is not the time, because what that's going to do is going to put you into a deeper state of breakdown, because here you are postpartum trying to recover your body from all that's happened, whether you've had, a vaginal birth or whether you've had a C-section. That's a lot that your system had to go through just to deliver this baby. Not forgetting the 9 months of growing this little thing, right? We need to be able to understand that there is a natural sign. I like to say 9 months in, 9 months out. Like, don't try and bounce back. This is such a toxic word to say, of bouncing back to our pre-baby size. It's not about that. We want to be able to make sure, like, I understand it's so important that you want to feel good about yourselves, but please, ladies, if there's one thing that I can tell you, if you are recently postpartum, please don't try and drop the weight too fast. There are going to be side effects of that, where you are going to start seeing your body break down. You're not going to be able to be or feed your baby, or you're not even going to be able to function if you need to be able to do other things. We need to kind of look at this as a healing process. Take the 9 months, right? There's a lot that's going on, especially if you're a first-time mom and everything is new to you. Sleep deprivation is real. And what do we know? Even if we're not having a baby and we're sleep deprived, it causes our hunger cues to go up, right? So where you can try and rest, recover, get nourishing foods, try and get some collagen into your system. I don't think creatine is really something I would recommend. I don't know too much about that, but take the time to heal. Please, 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 please. There's plenty of time to come back to your fitness levels. And I would say give yourself 9 months of healing and doing rehab movements, not to say that you can't exercise. I highly suggest that you go into a pelvic floor and diastasis kind of minded program, because those are the two things we can't run away from, ladies. When you get pregnant, okay, 100% of women will have diastasis recti. Okay, if you don't know what that is, that's a separation of the abdominal muscles at the front to make space for growing baby. 100% of this, 100% of women have this, right? Pelvic floor issues. We hear this all the time. I don't want to skip in the gym because I pee myself. A lot of people don't even pay attention to the pelvic floor until they're pregnant. We don't understand that for 10 months we're carrying a load, and our pelvic floor is literally at the base of our hips. Okay, it's the bottom of our core, it's the can, and it's meant to be buoyant in that it's like a spring. Okay, it can relax and it can contract. So what happens during pregnancy is there's a lot of obviously downward pressure, not just in front but downward, and we may experience pelvic floor weakness. This is again very common in women postpartum, but if we do nothing to rehab that in the months after baby, we then walk around with weak pelvic floors and therefore then get symptoms of maybe when we jump, we pee. Maybe when we sneeze, we pee. Maybe when we skip, we pee. So these are things, ladies, I just want you to be aware of, that it's not like, oh my God, I can't do anything about it. You can. Your pelvic floor is a muscle. And just like any muscle in our body, we can train to strengthen it. Okay. So if you are confused and or you want a little bit of help, come and speak to me in class. But I also want you guys to understand that not all pelvic floors are weak. Some of them can be overactive and tight. So in order to find the right rehab for you, or the right path, we need to understand whether your pelvic floor is weak or tight. That's something that we can kind of have a chat about one-on-one if that's, obviously if you want to keep it private, but it's just something for you guys to realize that I hear this all the time after pregnancy, and literally a lot of them are from women who've had their babies 10 to 15 years ago. And this just goes to show you how little care that they took of ladies after they had babies. It was literally like, all right, here's your baby, go back home. It's literally only now in the last 5 years that we are seeing more of a focus on rehab for women postpartum. I mean, women who have a C-section, I mean, that's like cutting through 7 layers of tissue, muscle fiber, nerve endings. It's a major surgery. And then people are just asking you to just bounce back. Like, hello, you get more rehab done for when you have an ACL surgery than a C-section. I mean, come on. And this is where we're really lacking. It's not just in Sri Lanka. This is, something that I see and hear from a lot of women from around the world. So don't be discouraged. There is help out there. Okay. If you want to help strengthen your pelvic floor, there are ways that we can do that. So even if it's not with me, you can go and find a physiotherapist who can work with you to help strengthen it. Because let me tell you, ladies, as we get older, these are things that it's going to be tougher. And it may not be a problem now. You may be like, in your 30s, skipping and being like, a little bit of pee is okay. But let me tell you, when it becomes a functional issue and you can't go out because you're worried that, you might pee yourself because somebody makes you laugh, like that becomes a quality of life issue, right? So let's not just kind of be like, okay, sorry, did somebody say something? No. Okay. So anyways, that was my little rant on the postpartum section and diastasis and the pelvic floor. So again, ladies, I think wow, we've just gone on almost for 2 hours. Thank you so much.
So I have put a link on the chat box. It's a Google form. Basically, there's a couple of questions on there. We're going to send, if you fill this Google form out, we will send you the lifestyle guidebook, our new updated lifestyle guidebook. And there are also some questions regarding if you would like ongoing updates regarding these topics as they develop. So if you just choose yes, no on those questions, we'll update you as and when we have more details. We are planning to make some small ebooks for women's training. We are planning to do some more videos and stuff with Alexi on these topics. And so if you fill this form, as and when we develop those or produce those, we're going to send them to you. So just the form is in the chat box. It's only 4 questions, so it's multiple choice and a couple of short answers. If you can answer those, we'll be good to go. Does anyone have any final questions before we close it out?
No.
All right, cool.
Thank you so much, ladies. Just to give you a heads up, we're going to try and do a little bit more woman-centric related webinars in the future. This is something that means it's close to my heart, and it's something that I want to be able to share with our, ladies in our community. So if you have things that you want to find out more, we are going to be reaching out to experts, doctors, physiotherapists to kind of help bridge that gap between what we know, what we think, the misconceptions, so that we can actually have more science-based, evidence-based information leading our lives, as opposed to old wives' tales and misconceptions. Yeah. Thank you so much again, ladies, for your time. Really appreciate it. Have a great weekend, and good luck with the voting tomorrow.